Today, we're going to learn how to seize FinTech's moment with 3 winning strategies for marketing and sales. And our first one, I'm very excited about. We're calling it FinTech is FOMO, stay where the action is in 2022. So I'm actually going to stop sharing because I want this to really just be a conversation. Lauren Crossett, you are the inventor of this phrase, FinTech is FOMO. So why don't you, that came up in our very first conversation together, why don't you tell us a little bit more about what that means to you?
I think it's a good summary of just like a lot of different aspects of like the FinTech ecosystem. It's incredibly close knit and tightly connected. And a lot of that is due to like the layering effect. Like typically a direct to consumer FinTech, as they go to market, they will need 10 to 15 vendors, and all of those vendors may have products that interact with each other. And then people may move from one company to another company. And then like the product manager who's at the direct to consumer FinTech may go to one of those. And so like, it's a pretty tight knit ecosystem. And there's a lot of conversations within it. And then like, I think it's important to just recognize that, and that word of mouth travels fast, and that even having like referral relationships is so important, so that it kind of feels like you're in with the in crowd. Like, oh, are you going to be at the unit party or are you going to be at the CODAP party? That's actually like a strategic question that I think probably doesn't get enough attention, because there's not this like awareness of, oh, why does that matter? And what impact could that drive? And then we've also kind of made up another term at Pinwheel called the FinTech singularity, which is like all direct to consumer FinTechs pretty much latch on to whatever new feature is really seeing a lot of traction with consumers. So if you think of the most obvious one, Chime did the simplest thing in the world. And they were like, you can get paid 2 days early because they can see the ACH coming in. It's like the simplest math of all time to say, like, as a carrot, can we extend these funds 2 days early, even when we know they're coming in? It's like really not much balance sheet risk. And it's like a very cheap way to incentivize behavior. And then every FinTech was like, how are they doing that? Like, when can we do that? Who do we work with? How do we offer it? It's like, it's really just a notch a file. And so like, if you think about all these other features that come in by one FinTech, they're typically adopted by all of them. So if you think about your go-to-market strategy, if you can nail that really like one solid client and one great use case, and just go repeat it with every other one of their competitors or people that have like similar offerings, then you're playing the FOMO game, and you're going to get a lot of leverage out of that.
Sheila, I want to get your perspective coming from both FinTech and large legacy institutions. Why do you think this element of networking and keeping a very, very tight network, conferences and events, that sort of thing, why do you think that is so important in this industry as opposed to others?
Yeah, thanks, Lauren. I think first is the obvious, right? On our day-to-day business routine, our heads down, we're not taking an opportunity to even look at the horizon. We're just looking at, oh my God, what meeting am I late for right now? So I think, the opportunity to create space for conferences and networking is so important, because it's the chance you have to sort of really get your mindset into listening, learning, and connecting, right? And as Lauren's pointed out, it's a kind of close-knit industry. A lot of people have worked together before, know each other from other businesses, moved from financial services to financial services. So relationships matter in this space. So two things I want to hit on, like the FOMO element. The reason I always went to conferences, and a lot of people do, is like, who am I going to, is my competitor going to get FaceTime with my target before I do? No, I want to be at the conference and have that chance that I have an opportunity. What is going to be the one topic that is discussed at this conference that I'm going to miss out on and not know about if I don't go? And I'm going to be left out of that conversation, or I'm not going to know about this new incredible vendor that is doing something that I've never heard of before, that I can either leverage or maybe copy the idea. So there's a lot of that FOMO element going on. But when it comes down to it, this industry in particular makes a lot of decisions based on relationships. And as Lauren pointed out, the products are often fairly homogenous. They do copy features. You're looking at a lot of companies that do broadly the same thing, and they're priced broadly the same. So how do you make a decision? You make a decision based on who you want to work with, who you trust, who you have the best relationship with, who you think is going to be most helpful when you pick up the phone when something is going wrong. And these relationships have to be established through networking, whether that's networking on the phone or networking in person. But a lot of these decisions get made that way. I know personally, I've made decisions based on that. Two companies that do basically the same thing, I can negotiate them to the same price. I'm going to pick the one I want to work with most, the person that I trust and the company that I trust. There's a lot of similarities. So these relationships are really key to your business growth.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sheila. Yeah. And that just speaks to the important, I mean, this is a very general point, but it is just worth emphasizing again and again that trust and relationships, they can be a differentiator. You don't always have to think about a differentiator as, your product. You can think about it as the type of, relationships and trust you build with folks in the industry. Lauren, so I feel like we've made the case for why having a really strong network in fintech is very important. Let's get a little more tactical for our audience. So Lauren, I'd love you to tell us about a specific example of a conference or event that was super powerful for Pinwheel and how you approached it.
Yeah, so I didn't actually go, but last week my whole team went to this Bitcoin Miami conference, and it kind of caught us by surprise that this was going to be such a huge event. And the team actually said like they probably didn't even need to buy passes. It was just all of the events surrounding the conference that were so impactful. But essentially we kind of caught wind of it like 3 weeks ago that there was a bit of a buzz of like this, hey, are you going to Bitcoin? We decided last minute to just send 3 people. And I'm so glad we did, because in the weeks, like kind of 2 weeks ahead of it and 1 week ahead of it, every single call we had, people were like, oh, are you going to be in Miami next week? Are you going to be in Miami next week? And so it wasn't really the conference, but it was the opportunity to like meet those people for lunch, for coffee, for a drink, for them to see us with all of the other vendors that they're already using. And to emphasize Sheila's point on like relationships and trust, there's also that element of like that portability of trust. Like if someone you trust also trusts this potential new vendor, that's a really good signal on kind of who they are and how they operate. And so like events like that are such a good opportunity to align your network and really leverage it. And one of our major clients is Cash App, and Cash App had this like large volcano type situation at the event, and being able to say like, yep, we support them was really impactful for the team. And so the team was like, there are a lot of people like very, very deep in Bitcoin and like, don't talk to us about payroll, your traditional financial services. But then they were like, wait, but people should get paid in Bitcoin. We do need payroll connectivity. This is actually really cool. And oh, you power Cash App. Great. And a lot of my team is ex-Plaid. And so they're like, oh, Plaid's cool. So it's like that correct alignment and also understanding who the people are at those events and like what's meaningful to them, what's cool versus what's not. If we went there and said like, oh, we're working with Discover or another big bank, I think the reaction would have been a lot different. And so it was important that the team really focus on like the company that's making a big splash there and aligning ourselves with that brand. Typically I would have said it's Money 2020. Like I remember the first time I ever went to that event, it felt like a really big turning point, because not only do you have all the fintechs, but you also have your more traditional consumer brands. Like I remember the first year that like Facebook was there and Amazon was there. I was like, oh, okay, this conference has some reach. All your major banks were there. your policy people were there, your regulators were there, all the VCs were there. It's like every meeting you needed to have in person could happen that week in Vegas. Incredibly exhausting, but so worth it. And the same thing, right? Of like just having a real game plan of like, what are all the events you need to be at and who's going to be there, and what other kind of follow on impact can you have if you also help bring people to the right events. So one thing we talk about a lot is how to leverage that ecosystem. And at events, it's not just like being there and having a booth. That's maybe you'll get some MQLs, but like how you can actually say, who's our most important prospect or our most important prospects, and how can we really make them feel like in partnering with us, they're partnering with like the leader in this ecosystem. And so like we can physically make them feel that if we basically say, come with us. And now we're going to take you to lunch with maybe other people that you need to meet. We're going to take you to a party and introduce you to regulators that we know. We're going to then like intro you to a few VCs and say like, this is what we do or don't like about this particular firm. So that our prospects aren't feeling like uncomfortable or unwelcome or like excluded, but they're feeling like, oh, we're at the cool kids table and we know how to stitch all of this together. And this company is making it really easy for us. And that's like the real beauty of conferences. It's not just like making sure people come to your booth and you have like a really good elevator pitch. It's being really strategic about like, who do we want to spend time with there? And how can we leverage all the work that we've done in the years prior to make those people feel like they're kind of part of something in working with us.
I love that. Yeah, thank you. I think that's also such a wonderful counterpoint to maybe a bit more conventional wisdom, which would say you need to get a booth, you need to go through the traditional sponsorship channels. What you're saying is you need to have a sort of relationship first focus on what you're going to get out of this conference. Focusing on one-on-ones is sort of what I hear in there. And also, I love that you are saying it's not necessarily about how are we immediately having sales meetings? How are we immediately pitching people? How are we getting every single MQL that we can? That's great, but how are we learning? How are we learning from regulators? How are we building our network that way? I think that's such a great, that's not like a hard marketing campaign or sales campaign, but that is building the foundation for your network that then you can go to again and again with your marketing outreach, with your sales outreach. So yeah, thank you. I love that.
Yeah, people want to do business with you if like you're already solving problems for them. So the sales conversation comes really naturally if you're already solving their problems that are even beyond the scope of what they thought you could solve. And I'm not saying you don't have to spend money on the booth or the traditional stuff, because sometimes, especially if you're in a competitive market like we are, there's a lot of just like cachet that comes with the ability to spend. But I wouldn't like try and tell anyone that if you just go and spend the money that you're going to see the impact. You have to like, that's the obvious stuff. That's table stakes. And then it's what you actually do when you get there that makes the big impact. And I'll shut up, Sheila.
Amazing. Yeah,
like, let's. You should do a seminar on this, how to work a conference, because I think you get a lot of job offers if people watch this thing, right? I mean, like, that's an amazing strategy that you just laid out, is making yourself valuable. And you're right, everyone wants to be associated with the cool kids at the conference. So the more that you can kind of have that, create that environment is very positive. I love it. Love it.
Yeah. Sheila, anything to add about like specific conferences that you've attended where you feel like you got a lot out of it by using certain strategies?
Yeah, I'll just add that, there's this element of expertise. And as Lauren was talking about, what problems can you solve for a potential client? And so for TrueAccord was, is the pioneer in digital debt collection. And it was fairly new technology to an industry whose regulations were written in the 1970s and left a big void in clarity around the use of these digital channels. And so the way we often best leveraged things like webinars and conferences is establishing ourselves as the sort of cognoscente, so to speak, on the topic of regulatory ins and outs of using digital channels. And that made us very much sought after as speakers in these conferences. And so we used a kind of a unique point of being a partner with clients through this journey that you'd have to take. And we're educating not only clients and prospects, but the rest of the industry as well on this topic. And that was, I guess, provided a unique angle for us to establish ourselves as trusted partners in a space that was very ambiguous to our clients.
Amazing. And you bring up such a good point around regulatory expertise, right? That's such an important facet in selling to US FinTech and FinServe organizations. I know from working with you at TrueAccord, Sheila, even in the past couple of years, all of the changes at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and being able to have in-house insights and expertise, or even if you don't have it in-house, outsourcing it through a trusted partner, making sure that you are demonstrating that expertise to everyone in your network is incredibly important. These are great insights. I mean, we could talk about the idea of FinTech as FOMO and building your network and maintaining it at conferences all day. I want to share a couple of quick takeaways from the conversation so far, and also my favorite Schitt's Creek gif. But, to sort of sum up what our speakers have said, conferences are incredibly necessary for building your network, but they can be overwhelming. Don't get caught up in the, shiny objects of getting a big sponsor, spending a lot of money on your booth or sponsorship. Maximize your one-on-one time, maximize your meetings, and plan that in advance. Remember that especially if you're an early stage company, these meetings aren't necessarily just for selling, they're from learning from experts, finding that cool kids table, building your own cool kids table, and inviting whoever you want to join it. And then I'll just say from the marketing perspective that follow-up is key, right? That all of these people that you meet, you have their email addresses, and even if you're not going to be hard selling them, sending your product demo link, they're the people you want to send funding announcements to, you want to share your thought leadership with, you want them to be part of your broader network, right? So it's not just meetings that sort of then vanish into the void, they become part of your engine, even if it's not someone who you're immediately going to sell to.